As we're waiting for folks to join, before we start our official welcoming remarks, I'm just going to do a few housekeeping items for tonight. As always, these sessions are recorded. They will be hosted permanently on the LA County Arts and Culture PAiD landing page on the LA County Arts and Culture website. Folks who attend or register to attend these sessions will get an email letting you know when those are live and available. And we are also joined this evening by Kristen Sakota from LA County Arts and Culture. And I'm going to hand it over to Kristen to make a few welcoming remarks.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It is really a joy to be with everybody tonight. I am such a fan of this program, and I'm really thrilled to have all of those who are partnering with us to deliver the incredible Public Artists in Development PAiD program for artists here in Los Angeles County. So, just a quick shout out of thanks to our national partners at the Mellon Foundation, our local partners here with Dyson and Womack, and so many others, and my team through the Civic Art Division at the LA County Department of Arts and Culture, as well as our guest speakers and presenters. So before we get going, I do want to share just a brief little bit about the Department of Arts and Culture, and then we're going to read our LA County land acknowledgement as well. So for anyone who's attending tonight who may not be familiar, the LA County Department of Arts and Culture, we're the local arts agency for LA County, and our mission is to advance arts, culture, and creativity all throughout Los Angeles. We achieve on this mission through our core program areas, and I invite you to learn more about them on our website. These include programs in grants. We're a grant maker for arts and cultural nonprofit organizations. We also provide professional development like this for both individual artists, but also for our nonprofit grantees. We support and lead county-wide arts education initiatives. So thinking about the role of arts for young people, both in school, in community, and in institutions. Through our Civic Art Division, we have commissioning opportunities for individual artists for our county capital projects, other special initiatives as well, and of course, programs like this one. We also have a small but mighty research and evaluation team because arts and data is part of the storytelling, it's part of the advocacy, and it's part of advancing our arts and culture infrastructure here in LA. We support creative career pathways, including internships, one of the largest paid arts internship programs for college students, the LA County Arts Internship Program. Check it out. And very soon we'll be launching our first ever arts internship program for high school students this summer. So keep in communication with us to learn about that. And lastly, we really look to utilize arts and culture to support and engage across all areas of civic life. So we've got a fabulous team that we call our cross-sector arts team, and that's where we house our creative strategist, artist in residence program, where we've got a call out right now as well. The due date, I think, is February 17th for the next creative strategist to do a year-long residency, this time with the LA County Office of Immigrant Affairs, thinking about how artists can bring that lens to building greater trust with immigrant communities, uplifting the value of our diverse communities and contributions, and really making connections between both immigrant serving organizations and culture organizations. So that was already a lot. I invite you to sign up for our newsletter if you're not already to hear about all these opportunities. And for today, I really just want to share that I love this program. I'm really thrilled, but I especially also was a champion of us having a program dedicated to environmental sustainability. For LA County, it's actually one of our official priorities that the LA County Board of Supervisors has voted on to be a countywide priority to support environmental sustainability across all areas. And so for us at the Department of Arts and Culture, it's one of my goals that we continue the learnings and to support our capacity as a field collectively to be more engaged around environmental and climate sustainability in and through the arts. So with that, I know we're going to all learn a lot. I'm going to be listening in too, and we'll move on now to the land acknowledgement. And thank you all so much for being here. So The County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tataviam, Serrano, Quiche, and Chumash peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, and reconciliation, and to elevating the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We're grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands, and we're dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments, including in no particular order, Fernandino Tataviam Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Tongva Indians of California Tribal Council, Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians Quiche Nation, Yuhaviatum of San Manuel Nation, San Fernando Band of Mission Indians, Coastal Band of Chumash Nation, Gabrielino Tongva Nation, and Gabrielino Tongva Tribe. And if you'd like to learn more about the First Peoples of LA County, including an entire toolkit on why a land acknowledgement matters, pronunciation guide, and first person narratives from tribal members and representatives that we were able to support with the LA City County Native American Indian Commission, which is housed within our department, please visit them at the lanaic.lacounty.gov. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kristen, and thank you, Pat and Brianna. I'm going to say goodbye for now as we move into our workshop for tonight. Thank you all. Okay. Good evening again, and thank you so much again to our county partners for always being here, championing this program and sharing their passion for the arts and culture all across our county. Before I introduce our guest speaker, Noe, tonight and jump into that, I want to go over a couple more housekeeping items. We will be using the Q&A feature in the Zoom tonight for our question and answers. So take a second right now, locate it. It's different from the comments or chat. So find the little Q&A symbol. Sometimes it's under the three dots for more. If you don't see it immediately at the bottom or top of your screen, just go ahead and open that up. Anytime during this presentation, if you have a question that comes up, go ahead and pop it in the chat. Don't feel like, or the Q&A. Don't feel like you need to wait till the end. We may bring some questions in as Noe and I are moving through this, but also it'll help us to kind of have a good gauge of how many questions we're getting and to make sure we're going to have time to answer everyone's questions. So as you think of things, open that Q&A and pop them in there. I'm also going to briefly introduce the program more generally. I know a lot of you have been to these, and I'm so happy for folks that continue to re-attend and join these sessions. They really are kind of a little masterclass, and it's so fantastic that it's free and available for us. So just to quickly reiterate, the PAiD program is this multi-year initiative that this is part of, funded by the Mellon Foundation as part of LA County Arts and Culture. It's aimed to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in the field of public art. This program designed to tackle critical barriers from many directions, from immediate to long-term and systemic. We have four parts of this program. The PAiD Artist Council, which is a group of 8 artists that work with us at Dyson and Womack to prepare and develop policy suggestions, policy recommendations that go back to the county to allow greater dialogue and better connection and communication between artists and commissioners. Those artists also produce a temporary public artwork. We are now in our second cycle of the PAiD Artist Council, and their projects will be going live in the next month or two. So please look out for that, as there'll be some amazing projects popping up all over the county as part of this program. You can also look at the county's website to see the programs from last year and documentation of the artists' works from the first Artist Council. There's also a paid apprenticeship, which is a group of 5 artists, 2 cycles for that program as well. And those artists are artists who have maybe done temporary works or performance works, but have never realized a permanent commission. And they have been given their first permanent commission with the county and are receiving designated mentorship and training to help them move through that process. Finally, we have the paid professional development workshops, which we're here tonight. You can also look back at the back catalog from the first series that was released that's already live and available on the county website, if you want to watch some of those. And finally, the PAiD website exists on the county, LA County Arts and Culture. There's a dedicated space for PAiD where, like I said, you can see these workshops, the old season of workshops. You can also see information about all of the different PAiD program elements that I've briefly covered here tonight. Coming up, so next week we have 2 workshops. We have on Monday, Crafting Compelling Public Art Proposals. We'll be joined by an artist named Sarah Rara, who is going to talk a lot about how they work to develop and craft proposals in a competitive process. And then on Wednesday, February 5th, we'll be in dialogue myself with Pat Gomez from LA County Arts and Culture to talk about all of the ways and the exciting things, the challenging things, the new things that artists need to understand when working with public agencies in the field of public art. And then we have a few more before we take a break and then come back for the second half of this series, which is going to be really focused on fabrication, materials, engineering, a lot of the hard skills that go into realizing permanent public artwork. So we're really excited about the second half of this series as well, and more information about that will be coming out soon. But turning to tonight and what we're going to be talking about this evening, I am so honored to be sitting here with our guest speaker, Noe Montez, tonight. And I'm going to introduce you a little bit more on the next slide, but Noe is joining us tonight to talk about creative sustainability in public art. And when we were crafting the idea for this session, I couldn't think of anyone who I more wanted to talk about this with than Noe, because I have been able to see firsthand how Noe's work has embraced this concept of sustainability from the material to the conceptual, from the way that it impacts those whose the work he is making and framing directly engage with, to it being a place of power and speaking truth to power. And so I'm so excited to be joined with Noe tonight and to talk about this topic from all of those angles, from the real, the material, the practices one can think about in their own studios, to the way that sustainability is part and parcel of the conceptual backbone of work and the way that one might approach community. So thank you, Noe, for joining us.
You.
Noe is an artist. He is based in Los Angeles. And for more than 20 years, oh my goodness, more than 20 years, has it been that long? Oh, wow.
Yes, I feel all those 20 years.
Yes. Noe's work has documented underrepresented communities to affect change through storytelling, education, and advocacy. I have seen firsthand the effects of that work on communities and commissioners. The themes of his work are both personal and community developed, with a strong focus on social issues that are shaping a new American narrative. As a facilitator, he's extensively experienced working with educational, cultural, civic institutions, and nonprofit organizations regionally in California and across the country. His list of commissions are broad and extensive. But I have a personal connection of being able to work on several projects together, and I can just speak wholeheartedly in my excitement to listen and join you in conversation with this tonight. So with that, Noe, I'm going to hand it over to you, but I'll be here and we'll be chatting throughout.
Okay, great, great. I really hope that we can have a conversation because I am also really excited about learning as well, always. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to share what I've learned really through the process of making artwork in communities. And also thank you to all the attendees who are here to listen and learn. Um, and County, thank you all for this program, which the last round of these sessions, I attended, I think every single one. It's such a great resource for artists. I mean, and it's free and it's a unique program. I've never seen any other state, county, agency do something like this. So I'm really thankful that this exists and very thankful to be a part of it. Um, so I want to first of all give you all a little bit of an outline of the structure of this presentation. I know it helps me to know what's coming, so I can kind of learn better. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. I'm going to share some examples of my work, talk a little bit about some of the themes and issues that I address in through my creative work. And then we are going to get into a conversation about the sustainability in these different aspects. And these are going to be more like informational. So for some of you who are here and you're like, okay, what does that mean? What is like literally, like practically, what are those things? That's where we'll talk about this a little bit. So we're going to talk about sustainability in materials and processes, and then in collaborative work. Like we're going to look at all these things through that lens of sustainability. And then we are going to talk about something that maybe is not talked about so much, but is a really important part of it. And it's a little bit like, it gets a little meta, but it's also just, we want to open up the thinking and the conversation around sustainability and not just have it be like these very um, prescribed things. We want to hopefully help people open up their thinking about sustainability. So um, I have another monitor right here, and and I'm gonna be looking that way for my notes. So if you apologize, but yeah.
Oh,
So
good.
so then we're gonna talk. Then I'm gonna show you some examples of all of the things that we're talking about through a case study of my own project, Imperial Air, and I'll show you examples of sustainability in materials and processes and collaboration, and also in this other idea that we want to talk about today, which is how framing and meaning, is related to sustainability. And then we'll open up the conversation to you all and answer some of your questions. So this presentation starts with a straightforward information that you can use, that artists can use in your thinking and for artwork proposals. And then it moves on to more complex notions of how sustainability intersects with other social issues and how as artists you can incorporate those ideas into your practice. The objective of this presentation is to inform artists about the subject of sustainability in art and to encourage you to become a part of the dialogue about sustainability in art and to be part of the efforts towards sustainability through your own creative practice. Um, because this is going to help everyone. It's going to help us all shape the definition of what sustainability is, and you can be a part of that process through your imagination. All right. So next slide. Okay. So mm, again, my name is Noe Montes. I'm originally from the Central Valley in California, and I grew up in a family of migrant farm workers. We moved around about every 6 months, following harvests of fruits and vegetables. Now I am based here in Los Angeles and I work throughout Southern California. I work in the mediums of photography. Photography is really central to what I do, and social practice as well, and public art. And for those of you who might not be familiar with social practice, it is a practice, it's a creative practice in which you engage with communities. And that can look many, many different ways. And I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like for me later. But that's what it is. It's engagement with communities through creative work. My work often starts by creating a photo documentary body of work. So I'll take a year, sometimes more, to research a subject and to do interviews, to do field work, usually about a specific social issue or specific place or specific community. So then that work is used in a whole bunch of different ways. Uh, we create. I have to work with local community benefit organizations. So then together we can create workshops using those materials from the photo and documentary materials that I create. Uh, we do workshops. We have community dialogues. Public artwork is also something that comes from that process, and publishing and exhibitions. So first I create a body of work, and then we kind of, sometimes say we activate it in all these different ways.
Mm.
And education and community engagement are really, really important aspects to the work that I do. Next slide. So some of the subjects that I've created artwork about are American history. Actually, more and more, I'm incorporating American history into my thinking and my creative work. Racial justice is something that is very central to my thinking, and again, more and more a part of my work. And I've also done work about homelessness, the unhoused community here in Los Angeles. So those are a few things. Next slide. So I've been working out as an artist for about 25 years. And during that time and through my work, my awareness of our relationship, meaning human beings' relationship to the natural world, and my understanding have grown just kind of through being in the world and seeing things and talking to people. Uh, just I started to become aware of the notion of sustainability and then understanding it more and more. So a couple of reasons that I began to think about this were because one of them is that I had a family. So I have children. They're 20 and 16 now. But once I had children, something shifted and I was like, oh, okay, what's their future look like?
Mm.
I realized that at the rate that the environment is being degraded, the world that my children will live in is going to be, poorer in terms of natural resources. And because of this, their quality of life is going to be lower than mine, which is kind of crazy. As a parent, that's a thing that you don't imagine, and obviously that you don't want.
Mm.
So um, another reason was that I actually began to see the harm that we are doing to the environment. And I saw how these issues intersect with almost all, all of the other issues that I was learning about, that I was talking to people about, that I was creating work about. So next slide. Um,
Mm.
and then, of course, there's the fact that the world seems to be on fire, right? I travel around Southern California quite a bit for my work, and I have seen so many fires in the last few years, and it seems like there's more and more each year. Um, Next slide. So I started to feel a little bit like this. Like I can't ignore this. I mean, I would have to try really hard to not see what is happening. Next slide. So, as I said, I began to see how sustainability was related to other issues that I'm interested in and that I try to address in the work that I do. Issues like economic justice
Mm.
and food systems and affordable housing. So, as I started to learn about the environment and our relationship to it, our unfortunately poor stewardship of the environment, I started to see how it is connected to these other issues. And then next slide. And then I got a commission from the California Air Resources Board, which we will talk about more in detail in a little bit. And in that project, I was able to really bring together a lot of the things that I was kind of thinking about and seeing around the issue of sustainability. Um, a lot of the ideas I was able to articulate those ideas through the work on this project,
Mm.
and uh, and I would begin where I gained an even better and deeper understanding of the expansiveness of the issue of sustainability or the concept of sustainability,
Mhm.
uh, but also the nuances of it. So I could kind of zoom in and out of it and just kind of see how it was a part of all these different conversations. So again, this project was a commission from the California Air Resources Board, and we will go into more detail in a little bit about that.
You
Next
know,
slide.
no way. When
Yeah,
I had a question that I was going to ask you, but you already answered it. So I'm just going to frame it a little bit, which is what I love about what you just walked through, and what I think is so unique about talking about sustainability in relationship to art practices and art making is in many other fields. I think this field is tied up around questions of technicality and compliance and code compliance. And that's how many folks, in other professions might find their way into this space, particularly perhaps in architecture, etc. And I think what's really beautiful about what you just walked through is you came up to this from a totally different direction. And I think we'll see as we move through this that framing of it, I think, has opened a lot of doors of thinking about sustainability in this very holistic way, that it's not just about following rules or getting a certification or complying with code, although those things are important and make a big difference in many ways, but that you started at it from a space that is more driven by your creative practice rather than the constraints. And I think when we think about it as a constraint, it can narrow our vision of what sustainability can be.
it's true. It's true, and thank you. Um, but yeah, I did come to it, kind of a, around from a different angle, through kind of all these social issues that I was thinking about and learning about.
Mm-hmm.
And well, we'll talk about this a little more, but the fact of the matter is that all of these things are connected, um, in the sense that these are all harms that are
Yeah.
being visited upon people, and they all kind of stem from one thing, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. But so to that first, or rather to what you were describing, yes, often we think of sustainability just in the sense of like compliance,
Mm-hmm.
right? Especially as artists who have a commission. We're like, oh, we have to do these things because it's required. It's a requirement from this commission.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to make sure that we have these kinds of materials and we are using these practices related to sustainability, related to environmental, you know, to respecting the environment, all these things. But we don't think about that in that sense. Like you said, it's often thought about as compliance, but that is a part of it, and it's an important part of it. So we're going to talk a little bit about those things first. So next slide. So first, I wanted to kind of put this definition out here of sustainability. So we all know how, at least how we're thinking about this for this talk. So sustainability is meeting present needs without compromising future generations' ability to meet their own needs by balancing environmental protection, social equity, and economic viability.
Mm.
This is often visualized as three interconnected pillars. Here's a visual for all you visual art folks. Um, so yeah, it's not just the environment, you
Yeah.
know. I think that's what we often think about, sustainability of the environment, but it's also, well, we're part of nature too, right? So we have to figure out a way to not only protect the environment, but protect ourselves, you
Hmm.
know, from all the harm that is being done to us through environmental degradation.
Hmm.
And that includes social equity. So what's interesting is that all these like high ideals are actually mm, like effective. How do I put this? Like if they are effective and positive in the long run in terms that like in economic terms, in
Hmm.
social terms,
Hmm.
all of these things. So we often think about them as like separate, but the fact is that if we do all these things that we actually need to do, we're all going to benefit. Even the people who kind of don't care about people.
Yeah.
So, all right. So let's move forward. So, why does sustainability matter to artists? So, we're going to talk about this in a few different ways. One of them is ethical considerations. So, it matters to artists, it matters to everyone, but it matters to artists because artworks use natural resources and processes, and some of these, use of resources and processes are very resource intensive.
Hmm.
So, we actually use, a lot of
Yep.
resources in our practice. So that's the thing. Um, the footprint of an artwork and its impact on places and communities and ecosystems is something that we need to think about in terms of sustainability.
Hmm.
Um, the longevity or permanence of public artworks is something to consider if you're going to make something as an artist that's going to be there for a really long time. Well, then we should consider how it affects the environment, its environment, uh,
Yep.
and during that time. And then the other reason that it's important is because we as artists, as cultural workers, are leaders in cultural transformation. Uh, and we can help define what sustainability in art means. So this is kind of like a newish conversation, right? Um, and we have the opportunity to shape that conversation through our practice, through our dialogue. And it's true. What's interesting is recently, uh, with all that's going on in our country, I have I have always thought this, but I've really seen the power of culture
Mm.
in society. Um, it's such an abstract thing, right? It seems like it's such a social construct, as many things are, but culture is so powerful, um, in ways that are hard to articulate, but that have real effects on our lives and our society. And we as artists are able to be a part of that process. So we have a lot of power in that sense. All right, next slide. So beyond those ethical considerations, we also have practical and professional considerations or benefits from incorporating sustainability into our practice. One of them is economic. Uh, Found and reclaimed and recycled materials are actually less expensive than new materials in many cases. So that's a thing. Um, and professionally, and these two last ones are related, but increasingly there are expectations from funders, from clients, from people who commission artwork, and also from communities that
Mm.
artists who are working with them incorporate sustainability into their practice. Just because so many things are moving that way, thank God. Um, but yeah, it also, so you as an artist, you can have a competitive advantage over someone who, let's say, you are proposing an artwork you have incorporated sustainable thinking and thoughts and practices into your proposal, and somebody else has not at all. It's going to be more attractive to the funder, to the commission, to the person who's commissioning the artwork, to have somebody who's aligned with their ideals, aligned with the things that we are supposed to be doing in terms of our environment and our lives. So,
I'd add one more to this list too that I just was thinking of when you were talking, which is a practical benefit that is the health of you as the artist as well, especially if you are still making your own work. I mean, it is the history books of art are littered with examples of artists adversely health-wise affected by materials that they have used, particularly, when we didn't know what certain materials might have bad effects on health. And I will say the majority of times that tends to be women and other groups that are underrepresented
uh,
minorities
uh,
that are kind of pushing the boundaries with materiality and really exploring things, but maybe in the times that that happened didn't have the knowledge around what that was doing to them. And so I think on a practical level, there's also, whether it's you or the folks that you are making your work, there's something very ethical there too about being aware of the materials that are surrounding you and
right.
and those who work with you.
Right, right. And as you're saying that, I'm also thinking about photography.
Yes. Yes.
Photography used to be the analog photography uh, is you use a lot of very toxic chemicals actually in
Yes.
analog photography. And actually that's how I learned photography originally uh,
Hmm.
through, developer and fixer and all these chemicals that you were in the lab
Yep.
putting your hands into and
Yep.
all of these things, breathing all those fumes.
Yep.
And then photography became digital, and behold, we're not exposed to those things anymore. And, so yeah, that's true too. Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah.
Uh, all right, let's see. Moving on to let me see, creative opportunity. So this is actually an interesting one to me. Uh, why does sustainability matter to artists? I think that if you have sustainability as one of your parameters or one of your constraints, um, you can develop your work in a way that is interesting or and relevant. So maybe it's not something that you do. Maybe it's not something that you have thought about before. But if you start thinking about it and thinking about how you can incorporate it into your practice, it can open up a space. It can open up, a direction for you to take your work into that you might not have had before. Um, so that's actually to me exciting and interesting. Uh, if you just start to incorporate some of these ideas, it helps you develop the work. And that's something that's super important to me. I imagine it's very important to artists to just kind of keep growing it, keep pushing your ideas, keep developing them.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've always thought of this as um, I always thought of developing as an artist as building yourself up or building yourself from the inside out. So it's just kind of go bigger. So, and then sustainability can become a subject, a theme, or content, or a component of your work. So if it's not something, again, that you consider, if you can take this opportunity to start thinking about it and thinking about how it fits with what you're already doing, what your
Yeah.
practice is like. And also, if you decide to make work about sustainability in whatever form that may take, uh, again, it's the creative opportunity where you can start making new work or different work or just developing what you already do in a different direction. Okay, moving on. Okay, so we're going to talk about materials and then we're going to talk about processes.
Yeah.
And before that, I just want to say about materials and processes. So I was mostly a photographer for a long time. and then have started making work in other mediums more recently-ish, in the last 5 years or so. And when I started, you know, working in these different mediums um, before I grasped the concept of materials and processes. And then at some point, it kind of hit me. I was like, oh, materials and processes is really cool. Like it's just like I'm like, that's a whole nother world, right? And if people are not aware of this, even just like the idea, the concept of it, you should Google it, you know, think about it, do some research, because it just opens up creative possibilities, but not only creative possibilities, or rather, you know, possibilities in what you can make, but also just it opens up your thinking about
Yep.
what you could do as an artist.
Yeah.
Because there's you know spaces and creative and I'm sorry in materials and both and materials and processes where you can just kind of go in, do something, see what happens. It's really interesting.
And for
Um,
folks that maybe don't understand the difference of why you're calling out materials and processes, and
mhm,
I want to make that distinction clear because I think it's really interesting as well. And it's going to come up a lot when we get into the latter half of these workshops.
right.
Materials are the raw materials that one's using. Processes, what Noe is referring to by processes, are the various ways in which one mm, utilizes those materials. So if we're talking about metal, steel, bronze, aluminum, that's the material. The process is the means by which you manipulate and utilize that material. So bending, rolling, welding, etching, um,
Machining.
CNC cutting, machining, exactly. Those are all processes. And what we're talking, there are things about both materials and processes that have impacts on sustainability and the environment. But I just wanted to clarify that because I like that that distinction is really important. And we
Yeah,
talk about it a lot in the fabrication field. Um, the the raw material is actually a really small choice compared and sometimes to the process by which you utilize that material.
but conversely, the material itself, you can sometimes just explore a material
Yeah,
and see what you can do with it. And that is, you know, can open up a whole set of ideas and expressive possibilities just
absolutely.
by taking a material and you know experimenting with it, playing with it, using it. Yeah. Okay. Um, so materials and you know in terms of sustainability, what we need to do as artists is that we actually need to do the work to educate ourselves because this is a new and developing area of art production. Often, when we think about sustainability in our daily lives, it's usually about like how we treat our waste. What we do with our waste is a thing that is a part of everyone's life, right? Like separate your recycling, etc. Um, and some of these ideas about sustainability have been around for a long time
Yep.
and are part of conversations about other aspects of our life, things like recycled and reclaimed and composite materials. Uh, Composite materials are, Emily, can you speak a tiny bit to that for
Yeah,
the people who might not know?
absolutely. It's when you're employing two or more materials in a combined way to get properties from both of them. And oftentimes, what that does when we're trying to use, maybe a material that is more sustainable than another material, sometimes those sustainable materials don't have all the properties you need it to have. So maybe you need something really strong and you're trying to use something. So you might do a composite material that utilizes that more sustainable material with something else or two sustainable materials combined or more that allows you to kind of create the conditions you're looking for in a more sustainable way.
Okay. Um, and then sourcing materials locally or regionally is something that you can do.
Hmm.
Uh, another part of that is that you're supporting vendors who are local and aligned with your ideas about sustainability. Uh, Use non-toxic finishings or coatings. Be aware of off-gassing. And I put this in there because this is something that I've learned about recently, which is that in the manufacture of many things, furniture, really everything, in the manufacture of all the things in our lives, through the process of manufacturing them, sometimes gases, toxic gases, are trapped inside that object, that the furniture, whatever it is. And then when that furniture or whatever thing it is that you have bought for your house or for your office is in your office, sometimes those gases are released. They're called VOCs, which stands for volatile organic compounds. And it's often the case that those things are just released over time into your environment. So that's the thing I think to be aware of, that actually there's a growing awareness of and
Mm,
conversation about. So
mm,
those things are potentially harming indoor air quality and health. Uh, so, and then I don't know if there's probably not a rating system, but there is more awareness of this. So I think you could even ask about that.
mhm,
Um, so how do materials age? Think about the maintenance requirements for the material that you're using over a long time.
mhm,
So are they going to break down into toxic compounds or things like that? So
mhm.
that's the thing to think about. And then for temporary artworks, you might think about what happens after that work is deinstalled and how that material is going to be disposed of.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was going to say, to your point about age, a typical public artwork, permanent public artwork's lifespan, it needs to be 20 to 25 years. That's usually what we're talking about there. And we all, if we live in and around Southern California, chances are you know of, have met someone, or have heard stories about somebody having to have their yards dug up for toxins and all sorts of things in them. So this idea of like how materials age, how they decompose is so important. Um, and we actually had a question that came up in the chat that I'm going to try to address because I think it's part of this, um, and helps me to bring up one other element I wanted to speak about here, Noe. The question was, do either of us know about a knowledge bank where people have documented the shelf life of things like tree
Mhm.
branches or other upcycled materials? Um, and I first want to say, like, first of all, for folks who don't, shelf life means like the longevity of something, like how long it stays in its condition that you want it to stay in. And I love this question because it's going to come up in a little bit too about like the ability to test and prove untested and unproved materials in permanent public artwork is one of the bigger hurdles to adopting the use of some of these materials. So I don't know, you might have an answer to this, Noe, but I don't know of resources that it has done this for these types of things. And to your point earlier about the space of artists being a space of creation, permanent public artworks are an opportunity to start to build these knowledge banks around how certain materials live over time through pieces, and we're going to go into that in a little bit more, but I don't personally know of a resource like that, but I actually wanted to call that out because I think that's a really interesting
Yeah.
point.
I I don't know either of a
Yeah.
resource like that. I think it's a really great question, and I think it's actually a really great idea for an art
Yeah.
project. If whoever asked the
Yeah.
question wants to start, uh, go ahead and mail themselves the idea so
Yeah.
they can trademark it. No, it's that's actually yeah, it is an interesting point. I don't know of any resource like that,
For
but
normal
it seems
materials,
like a very useful thing, right?
yeah, and normal, but materials you can buy off the shelf usually come with a data sheet.
Yes,
That's, they're going to have a data sheet that's going to give you all of that information, etc. But many of the sustainable materials we're talking about, and you're going to show in a moment, don't necessarily have those things in place yet.
right.
Yeah,
Right, in place. Again, this is a new and developing conversation. So, but it's great that we're thinking about it and talking about
yeah.
it. Okay. Um, Also about
Oh
materials.
yeah.
Oh no, go ahead to the
Okay.
slide. Yeah. So one thing to think about in terms of material is um, what story does this material already tell? So think about the material that you're using
Hmm.
and think about its history, what it's made of. Again, going to the idea of materials and processes. Again, you can take a material and that itself can be the starting point for creative work. So we wanted to also mention a couple of things. Biodegradable materials such as bamboo, natural fibers and dyes, new materials such as mycelium and hempcrete blocks. And we also want to mention the this concept of indigenous knowledge and traditional materials. So we're going to show you a couple of examples of those. If you go to the next slide. So in terms of what story a material might might already say. I want to show you this example of temporary installation, temporary artwork by Jasmine Urrea, who was in my cohort at the PAiD program. And what this is a installation of hot Cheetos in these, pillars. So what she wants to kind of address in her work, and specifically in this work, she's making a statement about industrialized food systems and their effects on individual and community health. So the material itself can be a part of the expression of your idea. Um, Moving on to the next slide. A couple of examples of new materials. This is mycelium brick,
Hmm.
which I want to show you a couple of examples of these new, interesting, sustainable materials. I do want to say that I don't know a lot about these, but I'm think they're very interesting, and it's something that we could just be aware of, learn about, think about. Mycelium specifically, there's a whole nother presentation that I'd love to give about mushrooms and you know the the systems in which they live as a model for our society is really interesting. But in any case, um, mycelium bricks are sustainable. They're lightweight building bricks. They're made from fungal root systems um, and biodegradable. They don't withstand a lot of weight, so they're not like great for putting heavy stuff on, but they might be interesting to create something like this, structures. Next slide. Another of these materials, new materials. Uh,
Sorry.
yeah, that one, hempcrete. So as the name implies, it's like concrete blocks, but made out of hemp. Uh, Non-toxic, energy efficient, all the things that you can see here. It's again a new and interesting material. I have seen some not in person, but I've seen online some structures, very big structures made from this. Um, so that's another material that's new. And then in terms of next slide of indigenous knowledge and traditional materials. So
Hmm.
first of all, I am really interested and excited about incorporating indigenous knowledge in every aspect of our lives.
Hmm.
In the conversation about sustainability, I think that we would do very, very well to learn, you know, how the people who lived on this land before us, what their relationship to the land was like, and what their relationship to the natural world was like.
Yeah.
So, there are materials, of course, like adobe that
Mhm.
you can make constructions from. There's also ideas like passive environmental control, which involves taking into account the natural elements to decide on the positioning and the placement of structures.
Hmm.
Like a very simple example is taking into account where the wind might come from
Yep.
and utilizing it as a pass through, as something that passes through your structure, or blocking it. things like that. Just literally, really
Mhm.
just thinking about how you do things. All right, next slide. All right, so we're going to talk about processes. Um, so the first thing, again, there are many ideas that we have known for a long time. I think that we're all aware of and are part of our thinking already. Things like using renewable energy sources. Think about the efficiency of the equipment in your studio. Digital versus physical production trade-offs. So, uh, using digital documents as opposed to paper documents. That's a very simple idea, but we do
Mhm.
so much of it. We do so much of it that it really could make a difference. Local fabrication. So, find fabricators that are local to you, so the materials don't have to move as far.
Mhm.
And also low related to that, low energy fabrication techniques. So there are different levels of resource usage in fabrication techniques. So it's something to consider. Transportation and installation. So first of all, our own mobility, how we get around. We can utilize public transportation. We can think about the kind of vehicle that we have, what kind of fuel it uses, and we can also think about this thing that we're doing right now, which is working online versus all driving to one place. Um, and then organizing and consolidation your trip and consolidating your travel isn't, if you are need to go somewhere, literally just think about, can I save a trip? Can I do a couple of things in this one trip? Um, and then modular design. So instead of making one enormous thing, maybe it's something that you can make in parts,
Yeah.
and that will cut down on uh, the transportation and installation uh, resource effort, right?
Yeah.
So it also minimizes, the equipment, the machinery used to install and move that. And then uh, carbon offsetting when shipping is unavoidable. So what this means is, and I don't know a ton of it about this, but the basics are you measure the emissions that you were using in your process, and then you can pay to reduce or offset uh, that same amount of emissions somewhere else. There are programs where you can do this. And
Mhm.
then an important part of it, though, is to verify the impact. So
Yeah.
it's something that's can be hard to verify. So, but there are systems in place for that. Emily, can you speak to that a little bit?
Totally. And, I actually, for this one and all of the things you've been saying, I want to just underscore, you can pick apart any material or any process and find where it is not sustainable. And I think what Noe is laying out really effectively here is that it is a suite of decision making that goes into trying to incorporate sustainability across all of these places. And there is going to be calculus and there's going to be an understanding of, what is the best one can do with the resources and the time and the constraints of the projects that you're facing. Carbon offsetting is one of those that certainly, has some criticisms around it, but is an option. And sometimes folks totally use that. And I will say there are better programs for it than others. So with all of these things, certainly do your research, talk to your fabricators, talk to your teams about, as you someone rightly noted in the chats, like digital doesn't necessarily mean non-toxic. It can also mean there's we all know with EVs, there's a tailpipe going somewhere. It might just not be in your backyard. And so I think that kind of awareness and you're going to talk about this, I know, but also grace in those decision making and understanding there's no perfect answer for any of these and that you're choosing within a suite of things. But ultimately, and I think you said this right at the top, you're choosing things that help you progress your work forward as well.
Mm.
And so I'd say carbon offsetting is part of that. And but you do need to do your research and make sure you're working with a reputable offset.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's a good point. And we will talk more about this. I mean, none of these things are the entire answer, and none of these things are perfect.
Yeah.
But I think our options are do these or don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that's up to you individually. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Totally.
So, and then moving on to collaboration. So, in the area of collaboration, sustainability often takes the form of making informed decisions about the organizations, companies, and people we are working with. In public art, um, this public art can be a very complex process, and it can include project managers, material providers, fabricators, shipping and transportation providers, engineers and architects, and art conservation companies.
Yeah.
So you might be working with some of these or all of these people, and you should inform yourself about their own practices and their own ideas in terms of sustainability if it's something that's important to you. Um, and then there's also in terms of collaboration, if you're working with community, which you likely will be unless you're a studio artist that only makes works in their studio. And so from community, one thing that I've learned is learning from their lived experience, from people's lived experience. Also, sharing knowledge and skills is important,
Hmm.
and community participation in artwork creation is also that goes more towards like the social and economic um, aspects of sustainability,
Hmm. Hmm.
and similarly investing in local economies. All right, so we can move on. So we want to make sure to say this. Sustainability is not just the artist's responsibility. In fact, the artist often does not have a lot of power in the decision-making processes on large-scale projects. The thing that we can do is educate ourselves, be intentional about our decisions and our actions,
Hmm.
and to help create awareness about this issue in the space of art.
Hmm.
What is required and what will be most effective is systemic change, right? All the parts of the art ecosystem must invest in sustainable ideas and practices.
Hmm.
Artists, ourselves, but also the people who are providing us materials and fabricators and art movers, galleries, art buyers, institutions, government. Everyone needs to be a part of this effort. So you can't make everybody do all of these things, but you can, you know,
Yeah.
make yourself do these things. And I just want to say that often um, getting over the initial inertia of doing something different,
Hmm.
it might be the hardest part just in our own practice. Um, but yeah, we want to make sure to make this point because I have actually been on a panel where artists are on a panel or not. I've seen a panel, I've attended like a talk where artists are, on stage and then somebody gets up, and says, what are you doing for sustainability, towards sustainability? And an artist, I can't remember who it was, but I really liked their answer where it was like, hey, why must it be us? Like, why is it my responsibility? Why are you not asking corporations and those things? So again, we are a fairly small cog in this big system,
Hmm.
but it takes us as well.
Yeah, and I also wanted to thank you for I really this slide is important and absolutely correct. And I think two things I want to highlight before we move out of this space is one that I think you're right. Artists are a small fraction of our global uh, issues with this. And I think what sometimes that last slide, I'm just actually going to go back to it about collaboration is to me extremely powerful, one of the space for artists in this field, because I feel like sustainability is related to respect and respecting oneself and respecting one's environment and respecting the community in which one works within. And even just crafting it and crafting the language that one talks about that in that way, I think is deeply powerful for folks to say, well, you respect me. You want to bring something healthful into my space.
Right.
like that is a very powerful statement and can change things for how folks understand it and expect folks to show up in their communities with that level of respect and care. And the second thing I want to add to that is, as Noe rightly said, this is not always going to be up, especially in the public art field, to the individual artist to make these decisions. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that oftentimes commissioning agencies are wary of sustainable materials for the reasons that we've just talked about. They may not come with the same level of testing. They may not come with the same level of kind of tried and true understanding of their ability to last certain amount of years and all of that sort of thing. Or they may just seem new and off the wall, or how do we maintain them, or how do we da da da. And so, in a landscape of public art where opportunities are limited and competition can be fierce, I want to also just say it's really important to check in with your commissioning agency, especially if you're in a competition-based space, to have a conversation with them about whether this is something they are interested in. We're certainly not here advocating that all of our artists go and immediately put, the most sustainable material they can find in their proposals, because that may not always translate the way that you want it to, especially if you have a commissioning agency that maybe, doesn't understand the material or is a little risk averse, which happens a lot in this field. So I just wanted to put a little PSA out there that that's part of why it's not just up to artists, is that sometimes, you may have all these intentions, but you may know that that might not be the thing that actually can help you get a project over the finish line. So there's a whole suite of ways to engage with this topic, beyond just materials and processes.
All right, thank you. I just want to say I really love that framing of sustainability being about respect.
Yeah.
Like I hadn't thought about that, and I think that's interesting, and it definitely deserves more thought, more consideration. Um, so beyond materials and processes, beyond the prescriptive things to make sure you are meeting the requirements. This part here, we're gonna talk about sustainability in a way that often is not talked about, and but I think is really interesting, maybe more interesting than even the other parts. Um, so um, let's move on to the next slide. So conceptual framing about sustainability. So this is thinking about sustainability as a concept or as a subject or as part of your practice. Uh, one thing, one way to do that is to work with an awareness and consideration of how this idea of sustainability intersects with other issues that you are already working, right? And it might not be obvious at first. They may seem like separate things, but really, I've come to see how so many things are connected. And we can use our creative work to implement and communicate sustainable values and to create awareness about this subject.
Mhm.
So creating artwork at the intersection of art and sustainability can address obviously environmental conservation, but also environmental justice and environmental equity, uh, economic exploitation, this culture of consumption that's actually consuming us, um, even things like inequality in education and public health. These things are all connected. And my experience has been one of my understanding of what sustainability means really growing over time, and talking to people and making work about different things. Um, I've really come to see how these things overlap, how these things intersect.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's important though that uh, I'm stating this, I'm saying sustainability intersects with other social issues, but I think it's really important to think about how that intersection works specifically, like each of us as artists, because this will help us gain a deeper understanding of the issue. But also importantly, as artists, it'll open up spaces and opportunities for realizing your ideas.
Mhm.
for creative thinking. Um, so the reason that I found that all of these things are connected is because much of the harm that we experience as communities, especially low income, marginalized communities,
Mhm.
much of the harm that people are experiencing stems from the fact that capitalism is so central to our society and our economy. And capitalism does not account for the fact that our natural resources are limited.
Mhm.
There's only enough of these things. There's only a set amount of these things. And also capitalism does not take people's well-being into consideration.
Mhm.
So to me, that's the reason that sustainability is connected to all of these other things, because it all stems from this great harm that's being done to us through this capitalist culture and economy.
Mhm.
So other ways to think about sustainability in terms of your work or your practice are cultural sustainability. So respecting and engaging with the artwork site history is something to be considered. Centering community voices is something that we say a lot in different spaces, but is also a part of this conversation. The longevity of meaning and not just materials. So we create meaning, right? All of us create meaning. We decide what is important to us and what is meaningful to us. But as artists, we can also do that for like not just for us, but like for our community, for wider society. And a way to do this, a way to create meaning, uh, and especially longevity of meaning, to kind of take your ideas that you think are important, put them in society, and then have them exist and affect society for long periods of time, is through programming, through education, through publication, and through having that work become part of institutions and institutional knowledge.
Yeah.
So I'll speak a little bit more about this in a bit. And then process transparency, literally what we're doing right now, making your sustainable choices visible and educational, creating interpretive elements to your work. So give some context information about what your work is addressing, whether it's on site or in talks or in presentations. Uh, Share, your experience of making the work,
Mhm.
and then documentation and storytelling around your process. So generally, just as an artist, that's actually very important. Just so you all know, documentation of your process is very important for your career, for your development, um, and then sharing that process out is important. Okay,
I
moving on.
totally agree with that.
All right. So so we've talked about a lot of things, and then so now what we want to do is share through this case study of this project that I've completed, Imperial Air, share what that looks like, share what those things that we've talked about look like in the real world. So first of all, a little bit of information about the project itself.
Mm.
Um, so the California Air Resources Board, also known as CARB, which is the agency in charge of air quality in California. Uh, it's complicated and bureaucratic. So they're in charge of what is it? There's like a distinction between different types of sources of pollution, right? So one of them is mobile, one of them is stationary. You- and so CARB is one of these agencies. They're the biggest one in the state. They have a lot of power in the sense that they create policy.
Mhm.
They create policy. They create the rules of you know emissions in cars and other pollution sources. In any case, the the California Air Resources Board was building a new headquarters, a Southern California headquarters in Riverside, a whole complex of new buildings. And as a part of that construction, they created an art program through which they commissioned 6 artists to create artworks for that site. I am one of the artists that was commissioned to create artwork. Uh, so I'm going to be sharing what that process was like from start to finish. All right, we can move on. So for me, what this project ended up being was it started, like I said, often many more projects start with a photo documentary project. So in this case, it was documentation of resident stories and social issues through photography and interviews. All of this work is published on this website, inlandempireair.com. You're welcome to check it out. It's photography and writing. And then another part of that project was a community engagement program in which we created and facilitated art and educational workshops and resources about the subject of air pollution and about the logistics industry and public health.
Mhm.
So the logistics industry is trucking and warehousing of commercial goods. And here in Southern California, it's a really a big industry that has a large impact on us in many different ways because the Port of Los Angeles is here. All the goods that are shipped into this country, many of the goods that are shipped into this country are shipped to the Port of Los Angeles, and then they're distributed to the rest of the country through trucks, trains, airplanes. But the infrastructure for all that is kind of all around us.
Mhm.
So that's the logistics industry. And then the third part of the project was this public artwork, which is titled Paradise. And it's a mural that is approximately 84 feet by 12 feet high, 84 feet long by 12 feet high. It's made of 32 panels of a material called rich light. And those panels have been machined to depict a design that incorporates images from the photo documentary project. So portraits and pictures of natural elements of the Inland Empire were rendered into this material. And this is what it looks like. It is the front wall of an auditorium um, at the CARB Southern California headquarters. Um, I, I think this is a public
Yep.
space. You can
Oh,
go
yeah.
and see this.
Anyone can go see it anytime they want.
Yeah. Uh, I, it was a pretty large scale project for me, and it was an interesting process. I have to say I'm pretty happy and proud with what we did. And so there's another view of this. This is one side of it, and this is just from the other angle. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. But
One
first,
of the things I love about this piece is this auditorium is almost more like a court.
uh-huh,
Like it's where the board sits when they're actually adjudicating folks that maybe violated emission standards. And we're talking industry folks like car manufacturers, lawnmower manufacturers,
yeah,
etc. And they actually have to come in and sit in front of this tribunal and be told, you're not following the rules and stuff. And I think there's something very powerful about the fact that they literally have to walk through this mural.
yeah,
They have to pass through this piece that shows the faces and the fauna and the flora in the community that's being impacted by the work that they're doing, and oftentimes not always the good work that they're doing. And
right.
I loved that element of this piece because I think to that conceptual framework, it's so strong.
Yeah, that was definitely some of the thinking behind that was, what state we have this opportunity to make a statement in a
Yeah.
space where people who make policy around air quality in the state of California are going to be every day. Because there's also like science labs at this facility.
Mhm.
Uh, so there's a lot of people work there all around this idea or this goal of creating policy to protect people, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and thinking of what can we say, the idea is that, well, in your decision making process, you should center the community
Hmm.
and center the natural world. That should be like that should take primacy in this process of making decisions about it. Um, so initially in the RFP, for me, this was new that I actually had sustainability requirements for the RFP. So everybody who proposed artwork, who submitted a proposal, had to also include a statement of sustainability in their proposal.
Hmm.
It was it was in the RFP in a few different places. It was mentioned. So, and of course, being the kind of agency that it is, it completely makes sense that they're requiring the artists that they commission to incorporate sustainability into their practice. I learned a lot during this period because I was doing a lot of research. I didn't have a language to talk about sustainability. So um, that was a part of the RFP submission. So then what we decided on, as far as materials, I figured out what I wanted to do, and I consulted with a fabricator to figure out what material we can use to render those images. And we decided on this material. It's called Rich Light. Rich Light is, in essence, paper. It's paper that has been infused with a resin, and then that has been compacted into panels. So that's what it is. It looks like wood, kind of. It looks like wood panels. So
The
next slide.
composite material.
Yeah, it's a composite material. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Next slide. So I promise that I'm not here to sell Rich Light, but I just wanted to point out some of the information about Rich Light that I got from uh, their. It's called the Rich Light Specifier Manual. So it's like this document that has the specifics of this material. And you as artists, when you're working on a proposal, documents like this is where you're going to find the information that you can incorporate into your proposal about the sustainable aspects of the materials and processes that you're with. So
Yeah.
this material is made in Tacoma, Washington. So although not local, it's actually also not doesn't come from very, very far away.
Yep.
And this is true of many specialized materials. There's not a lot of fabric, there's not a lot of people who make these. So they might be in very specific places.
Yeah.
The materials, like I said, the providers will often have a lot of information about their product sustainability because to them it's a valuable selling point, just as it is to artists. It's becoming more to artists. So you can find this kind of language in in their promotional materials, and in their specifying the like specs sheets. All right, next. So then the process for fabrication of this mural, what we did was we took panels of that material, and then we used a process called CNC machining, which is in essence, it's this really big machine that you can use different, let's call them drill bits or tools that shape material, and then you program it. So it's like it's attached to a computer, and you program it, and then the machine just works. So in terms of sustainability, the design of this you know this artwork was all done digitally. Like it was all done on software. The communication with the fabricators and all the people involved, all the different parties involved in this project, it was all digital. It was there was no paper, or yeah, I think there was probably zero paper, which is, now that I think about it, it's kind of amazing. And it was done locally. I have found a local fabricator for this, and here in Los Angeles. And the way this worked is, um, just to tell you a little bit about the material, we have two different layers of different colored materials, and this drill would drill down into those layers at different depths, and the different depths would create a dot of different size. So in that way, we were able to render these images into the rich light. So that's how that worked. So this project actually had a modular design. So instead of making one big wall that we would have to transport, like, I don't know what, it would not have been possible. It was made up of 32 4 by 8 foot panels. They were all machined at the fabricator studio. And then once they were all done with the machining, they were transported and installed, in 32 separate panels. So it all went, if we could go to the next slide, it all went on one truck. Literally, all the panels, all the hardware for installation, all the installation equipment, were taken to the site from Los Angeles to Riverside in one truck, and it was installed by a small crew of 4 people using scaffolding in less than a week. So for an artwork of this size, I think that is a really, really efficient and effective uh, process of manufacture and installation. I do want to go back one slide to one more, back one more. So the fabrication process. So, in terms of balancing uh, your thinking and your practices, for one thing that I thought about for this fabrication was that the actual drilling, the CNC machining, is a relatively slow process. The machine comes down, drills, goes up. So in terms of energy usage, that is a long time. It's a long time to machine 32 panels of material. So there's always trade-offs,
Mhm.
it's never going to be perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go forward again. One more. Okay. So then we talked about materials and processes in terms of sustainability. So now the other thing that we talked about was the framing and meaning,
Mm.
the conceptual framing and meaning of artwork. So for me, what I learned during the creation of this artwork and this project was that sustainability intersects with obviously negative health outcomes. Air pollution impacts people's health negatively. Also, though, the logistics industry displaces people. Literally, um, homes and apartment buildings were torn down to make more space for warehouses in this neighborhood where
Mm.
this gentleman in the middle picture lives or used to live. And then labor exploitation. So the logistics industry offers jobs to people that there's pros and cons, but overall, they're not great jobs. Um, so again, here, sustainability intersects with labor exploitation, something that you might not expect, but it is connected. So these are some of the things that I learned. Next slide. The other part of this that I mentioned of this project was programming. So we took the information from the photos, the interviews, everything that I learned, and we developed programming from it. One of the things that we did was develop an online resource for educators,
Mm.
and then a series of workshops with a local community organization. The workshops, we taught people both about art, about photography, literally like photography skills like composition, color, etc. But we also incorporated these ideas about, or the information about how the logistics industry affects communities in the Inland Empire into those workshops. Next slide. I wanted to share this. This is the work of one of the workshop participants from a workshop that we did in San Bernardino. So this is his photography and his writing that he created during the workshop. You can see from his lived experience, this is what he knows. It says Amazon and other logistics industry in the Inland Empire are guilty of environmental racism. They invaded our landscape with promise of economic growth for our communities when they don't even pay their employees a living wage. In return, warehouse factory workers are met with unsafe work and living environments and complete disregard for our lungs and our lives. So, first of all, I really loved the work of so many of the participants. It was really impressive to see the skills and the thoughtfulness and their creative work. Next slide. So, oh, I can you go back to that one slide real quick? So one thing I wanted to say about this work was that we published this online, and then somebody saw it, contacted us, and asked for permission to use this work, this specific work that we're looking at, in a toolkit, an educational toolkit about, um, about the environment for K through 12 students. So when we talked about creating meaning, the idea of sustainability, this is one way that works. you create artwork, you put it out in the world, and then it then gets utilized to educate people. So that was really great. I really love that part of this project. Next slide. So then this is my own, this is after I finished that project. Well, during that project, I learned about this environmental disaster that happened in the Inland Empire called the Stringfellow Acid Pits disaster.
Mm.
And about a year or more later, I had an opportunity to make artwork for a show at the Ontario Museum of History and Art in Ontario, California. And I was able to do research and learn more about that disaster. So this to me is the further development of like your understanding and your thinking as an artist about anything, but in this case, sustainability. This particular project, I won't go into a lot of detail, but it then became about gender inequality in the environmental movement.
Mm.
Again, we can see how, or rather, to me, I can see how these things intersect. Okay, and lastly, we just want to mention as a part of starting the conversation that hopefully, if people have questions, we want to mention these things. We want to acknowledge the complexity of this subject, of this practice. I think we've talked about this kind of throughout. We want to acknowledge that there are budget constraints, institutional limitations, as Emily said.
Mhm.
Some people, organizations, agencies who commission art, they are not ready to use new materials. It's understandable. It's going to take time. Greenwashing, that's a whole other conversation, but it's an important one. And lastly, progress over purity.
Mhm.
As we have said also throughout, uh, we can work with intention. We can adjust our thinking and our actions. It's not we're not going to solve everything, but if we have incremental progress, that's how change actually works in all spaces. Um, so that's it. That's what I have. I'm a little out of voice now.
Well, I'm going to give you a second to
Okay.
have a glass of water and give some instructions and also bring back our county folks to join us for the Q&A part of tonight. But I really just want to say thank you, Noe. That was for walking through all of that. And I like looking at it from material, from process to concept, and then seeing that happen in the real in this project, I think is really beautiful and powerful. And I think for folks who, you know, there are some folks who have been working in this field for a really, really long time, but I also really wanted to share your experience that I think came to this field kind of organically through your research, through your practice, through your concerns about these other areas we've been talking about, economic justice, racial justice, etc. Because I think that's such an authentic way to come into this topic and these fields, and I think gives folks a sense that, yeah, you can participate as such. And then let me just do one more thing. Okay, I think our county panelists are coming back online. Oh, and Noe also, it was very kind to share contact information for folks if you have questions or want to reach out to Noe
Oh,
further. So I'll leave this up for a second for folks.
yes, please feel free. If there's anything that I can help with, answer, I'm happy to do it.
Amazing. I have brought Brianna back as well, but it does seem to be kind of being slow, Pat, so bear with me. I apologize. We're trying to get Brianna back in as a panelist as well. Ah, okay. There we are. Hi, Brianna.
Hey.
So we do have some questions. So I'm just going to dive right in and we can share this across. There's some questions for the county, there's some questions for Noe, and some general questions. Also, some thanks for a really great presentation, which I echo and agree. Um, I'm going to kind of move around and not necessarily ask them all in one order, but I'm going to start here with a question directed to Noe, which is kind of about framing this in perspective to the current political environment we're in, and just wondering if you have seen effects on your studio public art practice, i.e., maybe less support, more hurdles during the administration's backlash against sustainability, DEI, all these sorts of things on a national level.
Well, yes, actually. I'm thinking specifically, I work with an organization called the Blue Sky Center.
Hmm.
Um, they are in the Cuyama Valley, which is about 2 hours north of here. And every year we apply for and often receive grants from the NEA. We actually also got grants from the CDC in the past to do art, engagement with the community there. And this past round, actually, just I was reading some emails about this today. They had initially chosen us, selected us to receive one of those grants again this year. It was an NEA grant, and uh, and they took it back
Mm.
because they said that they needed to review our language and you know our proposal uh, to make sure that it was in line with what the federal government had set out.
Mm.
And then today, it seems like we got it back again. So, uh, so yes, that one, and I think there's another grant with that same organization that we're still in the same place where
Mm.
uh, our language is being reviewed. But what we've learned is, well, a couple of things, and it's really hard to say because it's really hard to know exactly what's happening. But what we think, I guess, is that one thing that people who are applying for grants for funding from the federal government can do is just kind of reframe the language that they're using to what I want to say to make sure they align with what they're asking for because you're still talking about helping people um, and about being empathetic and about uh, being a resource for the community.
Mhm.
Just might have to say it in a different way. So that's one thing that we've experienced. Um, and then the other thing is that we have get the sense that even though there's a lot of just very kind of suppressive language from people at the top of the federal government around these issues, we kind of feel like in the agencies themselves, there are people who are still interested in supporting organizations and communities,
Mhm.
and they are doing their best to kind of navigate all of these challenges. So yeah, we have seen some of those things.
Thank you for answering that. The next question I'm going to bring up is there were a couple questions around the 25-year time frame for public art. I'm going to pose this to Pat and Brianna about this idea of 25 years being permanent and wondering where that might have come from or what that means, and also whether there are um, if that's being maybe re-examined in light of sustainability and maybe in favor of more temporary things. So I'm curious about Pat and Brianna, if you are having any of those dialogues and if you can share a little background on that.
Sure. And I just want to say I'm hoping I don't get kicked off of this because I keep getting this window popping up in my screen that tells me that there's some new patch that the county's putting in and they're going to restart my computer. So I keep saying no, but it keeps popping back. So I'm hoping I stay here.
Well, thanks for the heads up.
That said, um, yeah, the 25 years, that's in, you certainly can attest to this, Emily. They did 25 or 30 years is something that has just, it's sort of been a standard in the field
Yeah.
for many, many years. Um, it is, I guess, sort of came from this idea that um, if artwork is to be deemed permanent, it needs to have a significant period where it's going to be able to be in place and easily maintainable.
Mhm.
So it's kind of, I don't want to put it this way, but it's sort of like you're getting your the full value of the money and effort and that's being put into this work.
Mhm.
In terms of the temporary works, we are looking into that as much as we can, and we're trying to see where that can be included. But one of the things I think it's important to share is how these projects are developed in the first place.
Mhm.
They are very commonly, not always, but very commonly tied to capital improvements that the county is making. It's the same situation with cities and others. And what is a capital improvement? A capital improvement is an improvement on the land through building. So it's you're building the health center, you're building.
Oh, I can pick up where she left off. So you're
Thank you for
building the
yelling.
health center, you're building a park or creating a renovation project to county-owned public facilities that are intended to be a benefit for the public. And so that logic sort of applies, or historically has kind of applied to how they look at the artwork that is going to simultaneously get developed on site through a portion of that project funding. And so that kind of logic has been something that has guided a lot of public art projects in terms of like, well, we want to see this be a benefit to the public for the greatest amount of time possible. And so that sort of determined that 25-year mark as a minimum standard. But I think that as was brought up today, it's culture shifts and changes. And as Noe mentioned, there's a lot of individuals in these agencies that are as passionate and as interested in these ideas as artists. And so, we're certainly in Civic are very interested in promoting more sustainable public art projects. And we will definitely work with artists to find opportunities to bring that into the materials and the process, and working within the constraints that we face. So just like artists face creative constraints, we face creative constraints ourselves. But I think even this workshop, for me was really informative, just learning about the materials that, Noah, you have come across, Emily, you've come across that maybe I'm not familiar with. And so for us right now, a big part of our work in kind of encouraging this is like convening these types of opportunities so that we can learn about it, you all can learn about it, and then we can kind of discuss and move the needle forward.
Thank you. And I'm sad we lost Pat, but we will shoulder
She'll be
on.
back. Yeah.
Another question for you, Noe.
Mhm.
Um, the question is what was your, and I know this is kind of broad, but maybe we can distill it down a little bit, but what was your process in overseeing the fabrication of this piece if you weren't making it yourself and the work that went into the example piece you shared at CARB?
Yeah, so okay, let me think about that. So the
Yeah.
process obviously began with just first kind of conceptualizing what we were going to make. And then working with the fabricator, um, figuring out how we could make that through,
Mm-hmm.
again, materials and processes. And then doing a test. Like we thought that, I had never done this before. The fabricator hadn't done this exact thing before. So then you have to do testing. You have to do the thing that you think you want to do on a large scale. You have to do it on a small scale. So we made some small panels to see how it was going to look, how it was going to work. Um, in terms of the process, I would drive to the fabricator's studio and we would kind of talk about what we wanted to do and then we would just, machine the panel and see how it would work. Um, one thing for this particular project was that we had to kind of imagine how it was going to look at a distance because the way the image is rendered, you know, it changes if you go up close to it, if you go further away from it. So that was a thing that we had to take into consideration, and it was part of the process. And then and then there was the approvals, right? We had to submit these sample panels of machined material to well, in this case, to the project manager,
Mhm.
who then share it with the architect, the engineer, the the agency that commissioned the artwork. There's a lot of people involved in all these decision-making processes. Once it was approved, then we got started on making uh, the 32 panels, and I would go and kind of check out the individual panels as they were being made, or the fabricators would call me and say, "Hey, we have 5 of these." And I'd go and check it out, and make sure that they matched our digital design because we
Mhm.
were working off a design. And then that's how we, completed the machining of all the 32 panels, took it to the site. I was there for the installation as well. I wasn't, involved in actually hanging it because um, I think there were like rules
Mhm. Mhm.
that stated that I couldn't actually do the
Mhm.
installation.
Mhm.
But I was there for it and made sure that everything was as even as we could, but also, again, working with a project manager and getting feedback from engineers and architects and everybody else involved, making sure that it was meeting everybody's requirements and requests to the degree that we could. And then it was complete.
Excellent. That's a great example of project management.
Yeah.
Okay, another question that might be one for the county, and I think I'm asking this correctly, and let me know if I'm not, was around balancing considerations of like longevity and vandalism proof against different processes and materials, and kind of how they'll stand up over time. And, I think the question is kind of about like, where does the weight typically fall for the commissioning agency? And I know that's going to be different for different agencies, but maybe you could talk about it from the perspective of the county.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be different with each different site that we do a project at. So a lot of it is like conversations that we as the project managers will have with the location stakeholders and kind of first get a sense of like what they want to see for the space, what are big priorities for them. What are red flags for them? If they feel like, oh, this is a site that gets vandalized all the time, that might be like a big priority for them in determining what kind of project's going to go up. Is it going to fit within their existing, maintenance plans and budgets and capacity really to maintain the work? For other sites, that might not be, as pressing of a concern, and so there might be more wiggle room around what can get created for that space. And then alongside that, like what sort of conservation and maintenance sort of concessions can be granted. I also, know we have a fabulous collections conservation manager who is really interested in, first and foremost, kind of having conversations around like artistic integrity and what the artist wants to see for the lifespan of their work over time. So she'll have really great conversations just with the artist saying like, what are your expectations for this work? If we're to be stewards of the piece after you leave, what is the best case scenario? What do you mind, not happening? What do you really mind happening in terms of, degradation of the piece over time? And so I guess the short answer is there's not always like a one size fits all kind of or like a really hard and fast rule. It's always like an organic conversation with the artist, with the site, and with the other project stakeholders.
Thank you so much. If you see me, if you hear a little typing, I apologize. I probably should have muted. I'm also answering some questions by response because I know we're a little short on time and I want to try to give as many folks as possible answers. Um, I'm gonna read out one more question here, and this is again to Noe. Because you used community engagement components and you documented the input of the community, was censorship by the agency a consideration or maybe a concern if the community members had comments that shed less than a positive light on the agency or the industry, such as the example that you provided? Go
Um,
ahead. Yeah.
yeah. So this was such a big project with so many parts that it's kind of hard to think about where it could have been censored.
hmm
Um, so I guess there wasn't a consideration or concern about censorship
hmm
because, I mean, at least how I was thinking about it was that I was just documenting what, you know, what the community was saying, what I was learning, what the information of the lived experience of community members. So I would say no. I guess it's kind of a complex question because again, it was a big project with many parts. As far as the artwork itself, there was in terms of like, once I decided what the design was going to be, there were no requests to change it to anything different or include or not include anything like that, or not include any visual element of it. So I do know where that question stems from. I do know where it's coming from, and it's something I do think about. Um, but I haven't. I think I haven't really experienced somebody censoring what I'm trying to say or what I'm trying to do. Maybe once or twice, but that's like a whole. That's a,
Yeah.
it wasn't really relevant in this.
Maybe if I could flip that, one of the
Yeah.
questions I wanted to ask you was when you're collaborating with maybe fabricators or commissioning agencies or communities, are there any like signs or signals that you pick up on that help you understand that they're treating sustainability as a shared value rather than maybe like an add-on or a plus? Like, what are the things you look for within those spaces that help you see that this is maybe a shared value?
I think what comes to mind is learning about the experiences of the community, specifically the community, rather than fabricators or providers or purveyors of different things. Working with community, um, where I see that sustainability is a shared value is in learning about their experience. But what I notice is that they may not be thinking about it as sustainability, in the framework that we're talking about it or that we kind of generally speak about it. They are kind of more talking about their lived experience of the impacts you know, um, of industry in this case, uh, and they describe what's happening as unsustainable practices in terms of health and in terms of like local economies, etc. They're not calling it sustainability, but I am understanding it like that.
hmm
So,
hmm
so there
hmm
is, in that sense, there are a lot of shared, values, a lot of shared experiences and ideas within the communities. Like,
Yeah.
they're all experiencing these things. So that's interesting.
I really like that. There was a question in here that I answered as well through typing about like what's the right words to use. And I think like there's a lot of gatekeeping around
Mm.
this topic about like do you know the right word? Did you use the right material? Did you understand exactly what this was? And da, da, and I think if we can get anything across tonight, it's that bullet point about um was it perfection is the
Uh,
or
uh,
pure
Progress over purity, right?
progress over
I love
purity.
that. That was
Yes.
so good. I wrote that down.
Yes. These purity tests and litmus tests in this field can be in direct opposition to trying to actually achieve what we're trying to achieve, which is bring more folks into dialogue with this topic. And I think you portrayed that very eloquently tonight across the board. And I think that's an example of you saying that. Like, it doesn't matter if these different folks that you're working with know all of the language and all of the terms and, know to call it this or that, but it's a shared spirit of commitment to, as we were saying, respect for community and environment and ourselves.
Yeah.
Uh, that's really what you're seeing there.
It's actually a more powerful definition of sustainability.
Yeah.
When you hear people talk about what they are experiencing in regards to this issue. I mean, it's kind of what it's like when you have a whole bunch of data about a health outcome, but it's just a table with a bunch of entries on a piece of paper versus like talking to someone who is experiencing whatever that data is reflecting and getting to know their story, etc. So yeah, it's interesting.
We have gone through the questions and we are 2 minutes away from the top of the hour. And I want to be mindful of everyone's time. And just first of all, again, thank you so much, Noe, for sharing your practice, for sharing your experience, and for coming in with such a spirit of generosity tonight. And thank you as well, again, always to Pat and Brianna at LA County Arts and Culture. And Pat, I'm glad we got you back. Brianna finished your offer. You did a great job. I'm glad you gave the warning because we all would have been a little like, what happened? Um, but thank you. As always, we like to make sure folks can reach us at info@dysonwomack.com or follow us on Instagram to learn more about the upcoming workshops or to, if we didn't get your question on the nail tonight, you have follow-up questions, you can always email us. We will happily field your question or make sure it gets to the right folks at the county as well. So please feel free to reach out. We will be back next week with 2 workshops, and really excited to move this conversation further in different directions. So if you haven't already registered, please do. I just want to say thank you again to everyone. Thank you to the county. Thank you to our guest presenter. And thank you to our attendees for spending your evening with us, for giving up your time to come and learn and communicate and educate ourselves collectively, and build this field that we want to co-create together.
Oh, well, thank you to you too, Emily.
Yeah, thank you,
Absolutely.
Emily.
Thank
Excellent
you.
job, Noe. Wonderful
Yeah,
presentation. Planted
thank
some
you.
good seeds.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all. It's